Have you ever had a really bad haircut? Whenever you have a bad haircut, what's the one thing you have to avoid above all else? Well, obviously our family and friends, but more importantly, we try to avoid looking in mirrors. The last thing we want to see is a reminder of that bad decision that we made. I shouldn't have cut my bangs. I shouldn't have gotten the buzz cut. I shouldn't have grown out my mullet. And these are some of the questions that maybe we ask ourselves. In the same way, in our lives of faith as Christians, there are mirrors in our world, in our lives, that it almost forces us to acknowledge whether we are or are not living the Christian faith. And one of the best mirrors in the Christian life are the poor. When I was living abroad in Italy, living in Rome and studying theology there, every day when we'd make our way down the hill of the North American College, across the city to the various universities where we would study, you would be sure to encounter 5, 6, 7, as many as 10 homeless people. People without gainful employment, without money in their pocket. And it's like holding a mirror up to each one of us every time we encounter somebody who so radically has so little. Because it shows us how much we have. It shows us how selfish we are. And it's a really uncomfortable feeling. And I think this is really important to acknowledge as we recognize the saint today, St. Francis of Assisi. Because so often, how do we see St. Francis? We see him depicted as a small statue in a garden in our backyards. We celebrate him on October 4th and have our animals blessed. He is one remembered for his great canticle of the sun who loved nature, this patron saint of animals. And we almost sentimentalize the man beyond the point of reality. But the reality of St. Francis of Assisi is that he was a radical man. He was somebody that you would not want to encounter on the street. Because he lived and dressed as one who had nothing, he left all for the sake of the gospel. And this is about the radical conversion and the power of God's grace to change our lives. Because St. Francis was not always St. Francis. He grew up the son of 2 wealthy parents, Giovanni Francesco Brandone. He knew money, he knew contentment, he knew a full belly, and he knew the faith, but it wasn't often in the center of his life. Instead, what he really wanted to be was a great hero, was to serve in the military and gain great fame, great accolades, and be recognized for his courage. And it was then, early in the 13th century, that he was captured following a battle at Ponte San Giovanni. He spent almost a year in prison. And following that time, he experienced very deep conversion to the Lord. And he heard the Lord's voice calling him to serve his church in a radical way. And so it was St. Francis of Assisi who famously, in the square, much to the chagrin of his parents, stripped himself of his clothes as a sign of his radical embrace of poverty, and he embraced the bishop instead, this successor of the apostles, this guarantor of the unity of the church and our faith, and he gave himself wholly to the church in that moment. And so he spent his days in that region, walking among the hills and the foothills of Assisi, preaching the gospel in a radical way, and in giving everything away, St. Francis of Assisi came to recognize just how pervasive God's presence is in our lives. From the smallest blade of grass, to the sun in the sky, to the warmth of an embrace of a friend or a family he knew, the Lord was all in all, and he desired every portion of it. So he gave his life in service to that. And it's a reminder for us, as we hold that mirror up of poverty, what are the ways in which I'm still bound to this world? What can I give away for the sake of knowing God more? Wouldn't it be more worthwhile to have less, but to know God more? And this is what the gospel is leading us towards, a rejection of what the world would offer for the sake of the fullness of what Christ does. May God bless you.